Good evening and welcome to another edition of This Week in 60 Minutes. Welcome to those of you joining us on Facebook. I'm your host, Rudy Balgobin.
And I am your co-host, Juan Edgel Jr. Good evening and thanks for joining us.
Yes, on tonight's edition of This Week in 60 Minutes, we'll be dealing with the topic, continued misstep by the coalition government.
Rudy, today the party observed the death anniversary of Michael Ford. He died at the age of 22 after a package was taken to Freedom House by Emmanuel Fairbairn, who was subsequently fingered in the X-13 terror plan. The party would have celebrated his life because by his bravery, he actually saved many leaders of the PPP by ensuring that package was taken to the exit, saving lives. So today we observe that the PPP, the PYO, and the WPO, they had representatives who laid wreaths at the place that he was buried. So today we remember Michael Ford and his bravery and what he would have done to save the lives of many persons.
Yes, definitely important to remember those who have struggled and went through a lot in Guyana for democracy.
Yes,
speaking of those who have struggled and went through a lot in Guyana for democracy, yesterday we also celebrated the life of two young men from Barbados who were at the time protesting the Guyana Defense Force removal of ballot boxes from places of poll. Yesterday would have marked 46 years that those comrades laid their life down for the struggle for free and fair elections and for democracy in Guyana. And it would have seemed that here today in 2019, we're heading back to that same situation once again, where we are once again involved in a struggle for democracy, for free and fair elections, for the Constitution to be upheld, and for the rule of law to prevail in Guyana. Now that takes us over to current day, 2019. Yesterday we saw a letter from former Attorney General Mr. Mobir Ranin Landlal acting on behalf of the leader of the opposition, where he wrote to Mr. Keith Lowenfield, the Chief Elections Officer of GCOM, urging him and bringing to his attention the orders and the ruling of the CCJ, which are also binding on GCOM, and urging him to commence preparation for the holding of general and regional elections on or before the 18th of September 2019.
And that is mandated by the Constitution,
yes,
of course. That is not his timeline
exactly.
or the opposition, that is according to the Constitution.
According to the Constitution, it was further compounded by the rulings and orders made by the Caribbean Court of Justice after the recently concluded court cases. So, moving on from that position where we have him writing to them. So
just before you go on, Rudy, we did see that several civil society organizations and groups, they have now been calling on this government to call the elections to respect the Constitution. We saw that the International Center for Democracy, the Guyana Manufacturing and Services Association, and just today, this afternoon, I saw a press statement by the Private Sector Commission, and they have now urged this government to respect the Constitution and to call elections. It is basically, and it is clear for all to see, that civil society, they understand the importance of what would have happened, the no confidence motion which was passed last year, and they understand that the CCJ has pronounced on the matter, the no confidence motion was valid, and so elections are due. And we would urge more Guyanese to continue to stand up for the Constitution, to continue to stand up for democracy and what is right. There's no question about it that elections are due, and it is good to see that organizations are now coming on board to urge this government to do what they're supposed to be doing, which is to honor the Constitution and call elections.
Well, as we all know, GCOM has been engaged in the fight for house-to-house elections. In fact, I have here with me the official gazette that was, as of 6 o'clock yesterday afternoon, this was not published on the website, and what this says here is the official gazette, an extraordinary order, subsidiary legislation, which is an order
Yeah.
made under the National Registration Act in the exercise of the power conferred upon the Elections Commission by Section 6 of the National Registration Act. The Commission make the following order, and this was signed by Justice Retired James Patterson. And it says that on the 11th day of June 2019, the persons to whom this order applies shall, in accordance with Section 6 of the Act, be registered under the process of house-to-house registration with reference to 31st October 2019, and the registration of those persons shall begin on the 20th of July 2019 and end on the 20th of October 2019. Now, just for the reiteration of the public, there's a court case in court stopping this.
Stopping that from happening.
Yes, this court case, as we mentioned earlier here on the show, that the Chief Justice asked for additional submissions, and she has set a date in which she would make her decision.
Yes.
However, with a brief, there is another way that the law mandates that updating of the list.
Which is
and
claims and objections.
Claims and objection. I'd have one just read
Sure.
the facts of that for you guys.
Okay, well, the claims and objection exercise, and we've been repeating this over and over again, but it will allow any eligible Guyanese citizen who has reached the age of 18 years old to be registered if their name is not on the voters list. It will allow any eligible Guyanese citizen to get a transfer from one voting district to another in the event that they change their place of residence. It will allow any eligible Guyanese citizen to do a name change. It will allow for the removal of a dead person from the voters list, and it will allow for objections to be made to the name of someone not eligible to be on the voters list. Now, apart from these facts that we see here, I would have also seen that a political analyst by the name of Peter Wickham, he would have given an opinion on the list, and he said that the list can be used in its present form.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is someone that would have been doing work in the Caribbean, and he recognizes that the list, right, in its present form may not be 100% accurate, but as we just highlighted from the claims and objections, the list can be perfected just by doing this claims and objection period. So he actually said that the list in its present form can be used for the elections upcoming.
And this is in conformity with the chief elections, the legal officer of GCOM herself saying that she's on it. Yes. Okay, so the most topical issue that everyone has been clamoring about for the past few weeks is the appointment of a new chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. Now, since last week we were here, we spoke about that process. We had Mr. Bishop Juan Edgil on the program, who was one of the representatives representing the leader of the opposition in the informal process, and we had a very lengthy discussion. Now, from since then, Thursday, there was another meeting the following Thursday, and two persons who were under active consideration was rejected by the president's reps, and they advised that one of those persons was rejected and the other one was shortlisted, which then brought the 5 persons to a short list, which the president claims that are not unacceptable to him. Following that, the president himself, the president had a press conference where he said that the appointment of a chairman of the Guyana Election Commission could be done as early as Monday. Now, this is Friday, and the leader of the opposition, through his representative, Ms. Gail Teixeira, wrote to him and said that if this is truly what the president wants, it's not political rhetoric, then we should meet throughout the weekend and try to hammer out, as the CCJ pointed out, hammer out the names so that you can shortlist, that you have shortlisted. And up to that stage, there were 5 names shortlisted. Mr.
But
Harman,
they didn't meet over the weekend.
No,
they didn't meet over the weekend.
That was sent off on Friday. What subsequently happened was Mr. Harman replied on Saturday with a letter of his own and says, His Excellency now wishes to suggest for the consideration of the leader of the opposition a short list of 2 names extracted from the list of 8 earlier submitted. Now, on this program, I would have pointed out the 8 persons and their connection to the PNC that the president would have shortlist, put on a list and submitted.
But Rudy, I find it quite ridiculous that the president would submit a list that is not even acceptable to himself.
Well, that
So
is
what is he exactly hoping to accomplish by submitting a list of 8 people, and those 8 people don't even enjoy his confidence? He doesn't view them as fit and proper, so why exactly would he submit a list? What exactly is the leader of the opposition supposed to do with that list if the list is not the people who he wants to see as GCOM chair?
very important question, because the leader of the opposition himself was not clear on this matter. So they wrote to Mr. Harman, but before we get there, the 2 persons that he would have shortlisted from his list of 8 is Cassandra Alves and Claudette Bennett. Now, I would have mentioned earlier that Ms. Cassandra Alves is a person in her 40s, is the daughter of Kester Alves, a spokesperson for the former Forbes Burnham-led PNC government and advisor to Mr. Burnham himself. And of course, Claudette Bennett, in her late 70s, is someone perceived to be very close to the PNCR administration. Now, those questions, the one just highlighted, were the exact question everyone was thinking about, including the leader of the opposition. And so Ms. Gail Teixeira on Saturday again engaged Mr. Harman and wrote on the leader of the opposition's behalf, where she sought clarity. And I quote, she said, "As a result, the leader of the opposition is seeking clarity with regards to the status of the 5 names that were shortlisted." There was no other response until Monday, which they then subsequently met on Tuesday, the leader of the opposition and the president. And in a joint statement, it was agreed, and I quote, that from the list of 5 names shortlisted by the working group, 4 were found not unacceptable to the president. And as part of the hammering out process, the 2 names suggested by the president and others, as may be necessary, will be discussed further. Now, as it relates to the further hammering out of this process, the teams, a smaller group, met earlier today. Representing the leader of the opposition was former Attorney General Mohabir Anil Nandlal and PPPC presidential candidate Mr. Irfan Ali. And representing the president was Mr. Harman and Ms. Valda Lawrence. And at that meeting, the delegates representing the leader of the opposition conveyed to that team that the 2 names, which I mentioned earlier, that the president suggested and shortlisted, do not find favor with the leader of the opposition. However, the leader of the opposition has submitted 4 names for the consideration of the president, and tomorrow those teams will be meeting again to continue talks and try to hammer out so that we can arrive at a list of 6 that is acceptable to the president. Now, with that said, we'll be taking a very short break, and when we come back, we'll be introducing our guests for tonight. Operators?
Yes. Stay tuned. I don't think the operators are quite ready.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Unconstitutional, illegal. Our democracy is under threat. As of 21 March, the APNU AFC government is illegitimate. While they fatten their pockets and preserve their privileges, our people suffer. Their failure puts us in limbo and threatens Guyanese jobs, investments, and our future. Mr. Granger, your time is up. You're putting democracy at risk. It's time to respect our constitution. Call the election now. Unconstitutional, illegal. Our democracy is under threat. As of 21 March, the APNU AFC government is illegitimate. While they fatten their pockets and preserve their privileges, our people suffer. Their failure puts us in limbo and threatens Guyanese jobs, investments, and our future. Mr. Granger, your time is up. You're putting democracy at risk. It's time to respect our constitution. Call the election now. Unconstitutional, illegal. Our democracy is under threat. As of 21 March, the APNU AFC government is illegitimate. While they fatten their pockets and preserve their privileges, our people suffer. Their failure puts us in limbo and threatens Guyanese jobs, investments, and our future. Mr. Granger, your time is up. You're putting democracy at risk. It's time to respect our constitution. Call the election now. Unconstitutional, illegal. Our democracy is under threat. As of 21 March, the APNU AFC government is illegitimate. While they fatten their pockets and preserve their privileges, our people suffer. Their failure puts us in limbo and threatens Guyanese jobs, investments, and our future. Mr. Granger, your time is up. You're putting democracy at risk. It's time to respect our constitution. Call the election now. Unconstitutional, illegal. Our democracy is under threat. As of 21 March, the APNU AFC government is illegitimate. While they fatten their pockets and preserve their privileges, our people suffer. Their failure puts us in limbo and threatens Guyanese jobs, investments, and our future. Mr. Granger, your time is up. You're putting democracy at risk. It's time to respect our constitution. Call the election now. Unconstitutional, illegal. Our democracy is under threat. As of 21 March, the APNU AFC government is illegitimate. While they fatten their pockets and preserve their privileges, our people suffer. Their failure puts us in limbo and threatens Guyanese jobs, investments, and our future. Mr. Granger, your time is up. You're putting democracy at risk. It's time to respect our constitution. Call the election now.
Viewers, good night. Tonight, I'm pleased to report to you on a meeting between Leader of the Opposition, myself, President Granger, and Joseph Harmon in relation to the selection of the chairman of GCOM. As you're aware, the CCJ would have ruled, and we're in the process of completing all that is necessary to ensure that we have elections within the constitutional time as has been ordered by the CCJ. We must ensure that our elections are held within the time frame and within the framework of the Constitution. And this is the position of the People's Progressive Party. You will also know that as of now, we're dealing with a caretaker government, a government that has very limited reach, and one that its only assignment, basically, is to prepare for the elections. Viewers, my apologies. As you're aware, we had another Patterson moment. Power outage and blackouts is an order of the day, and we just had one of that here at the Leader of the Opposition office, so my apologies. At the time of the power outage, I was about to read the joint statement by His Excellency President David Granger and the Honorable Bar Jagdeo, Leader of the Opposition. The President, accompanied by Joseph Harmon, Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency, and the Leader of the Opposition, along with Mr. Irfan Ali, Member of Parliament, met today to discuss the appointment of a chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. It was agreed, 1, that from the list of 5 names shortlisted by the working group, 4 were found not unacceptable to the President. And 2, as part of the hammering out process, the 2 names suggested by the President and others as may be necessary will be discussed further. The parties agreed to continue meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, the 17th of July, 2019. This is the joint statement by the Leader of the Opposition and President David Granger. So viewers, there we have it. That's an update of the meeting between the Leader of the Opposition and the President in relation to the selection of the new chairman of GCOM. Let us all continue to work, commit ourselves to the process of ensuring the rule of law is upheld, democracy is safeguarded, and our Constitution is protected. All of this must result in all constitutional players fulfilling their mandate and ensuring that the order of the CCJ and the Constitution, which makes it necessary on the passage of the no confidence motion for elections to be held within 3 months is done. And democracy will win in the end. The rule of law will be upheld, and our Constitution will be protected. This is the fight all of us must continue, now and in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you for staying with us. You just heard from the PPP's presidential candidate, Mr. Irfan Ali. He was updating you on the developments with the meetings that he himself and Dr. Barajagdio had with the team from the government side. With us tonight in studio is, I'm sure, no stranger to many of you. It is PPPC parliamentarian, Ms. Priya Manichan. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. I watch you when you're doing your week in 60 minutes. I like your program.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, so welcome to the program, and we get right into it. So earlier in the program, we were talking about the missteps and the pattern of behavior from the coalition government. We spoke about the push for house to house by GCOM, the process as it involves the appointment of a chairman of GCOM and the delaying of the election. It's clearly a delaying tactic. What would you say to the viewers and your views on these issues?
Right. So, to me, this is one of the most unfortunate periods in our history, because our young people have to relive what our poor parents have gone through. And I thought we had conquered as a country, and that is, the return to democratic norms, whether you like it or not. Nobody wants to remove from government, but these are processes we all subscribe to. When Granger ran for the presidency, he subscribed to the Constitution and all the articles in that Constitution. When he challenged Donald Ramatara presidency in 2014, he was challenging based on that article of the Constitution that allows him to say he has no confidence on behalf of the people in the government. And now now that this has been done to him, he's forcing our young people, he's forcing our older people to relive those painful days of Guyana. He's forcing our business people. I was at a businessman yesterday doing a particular, getting a particular service, and he said, I can't live like this, Priya. I can't every 5 years try to figure out what's going to happen with my business. So he has actually taken a decision to down staff and hold. Right now, every time something like that happens, that's one business, a business that is hiring 250 persons, that is paying a significant amount of taxes every month. Every time a business does that, this whole country suffers. And so the Granger administration will go down in history as one of the biggest disappointments this country ever saw. People who would not ordinarily have done that took a risk and lived in modern, changed Guyana and voted for him and his government. And this is what they've brought us to. And it is unforgivable. It is not something people will forget about him, and this will be his legacy. Him and all his ministers, this will be their legacy. Indeed, I don't see anything that they have done that we can point to say, well, Jagdeo's legacy was, for example, debt relief and the LCDS and putting us on, giving us international recognition about the resources our country had. So different people have different legacies. What is going to be his? Fighting against democratic norms, holding on to power, coming up with all kinds of excuses, mathematical abnormalities, and you appoint a dual citizen, and then you're questioning whether he can make a vote. All these things are you just come over as a crook.
As a lawyer, what's your take on what's happening at GCOM? But
you don't even need my opinion as a lawyer. The CCJ has rendered the legal judgment for the government, for the country, and the Caribbean Court of Justice is a regional institution. It's established by treaty. Well, it's established by a treaty of many CARICOM countries, although only 3 are actually using it as their highest court, including Guyana. And this court has said what GCOM must do. The court has said, look, GCOM, you are not above the Constitution. You have to comply with the Constitution, and the Constitution says that when a government falls in a no confidence motion, and this government has fallen, that's what the CCJ said, everybody must be subject to its provisions. The president is not above the Constitution. The speaker is not above the Constitution. The GCOM, and they specifically mentioned GCOM. They said implicit in that is including GCOM.
Yes.
So GCOM doesn't have a choice about whether they're ready or not. GCOM is constitutionally bound to hold an election in 3 months.
Yes.
And 3 months from the 18th of June, the people were very clear about that. The judges were very clear. So everybody who goes against that, you could do it. You could hold on to power for a couple of months. We'll be judging you. We'll be watching you. That will be your legacy. Carry on.
Yes, indeed. If we can just shift focus a little bit now on cost of living. We would have seen a number of stakeholders in the country affected by cost of living. There are farmers, our single mothers, there are taxi drivers or businessmen, as you were mentioning before. A number of people have been affected by cost of living, or their standard of living has significantly dipped since 2015. Can you give us a view on this? Or what is your perspective now, seeing where you were working in the previous government, what you had in place before and what is currently happening now?
Right. So the
Give us a
Minister of
synopsis.
Finance has a reason for why his PSIP, the Public Service Implementation Program, can't go on. He says, we don't have enough engineers. Or somebody said, we didn't have any more engineers than you had. We just had an efficient government. We had people who worked, people who didn't close their eyes at 3 o'clock and sleep, people who didn't think that this was a party to collect a high salary, people who actually pushed it. We also had some lazy people, and that's a reality. In every government you'll have that, but the problem with this executive government is that they're here, they've spent from December to now, fighting off holding an election. So they're not serving people. They don't care about if your children go to school, if they could put food in their lunch kits. They don't care this August holiday. How are you keeping them safe? How are you entertaining them? How are businesses going to function if people are withdrawing monies? How is this affecting, we have different things happening around the world that will affect the remittances that are
Yes.
coming to Guyana. How are people going to live when that happens? That's not concerning them. Their concern is right now to scamp and crook their way into staying in office. And so your cost of living will go up, as people have seen. I spoke to a couple, one is a teacher and one is a public servant working in a public service organization. And they used to be able to spend one salary and save one salary, and they're now spending a salary and a half to be able to live, a family of 4. And that is very telling for, and these are not people who eat out a lot, these are regular, this is the standard type of Guyanese family who try to live within their means, don't live on a loan, don't borrow, don't owe, try to, give their children a decent life but live within their means. And that for me is very telling. I know for myself that we are definitely, it's costing us more to live.
Yes.
And it will. Your electricity bill has gone up by 14%.
Yes.
Because you now have a 14% VAT attached to it. So you could say, oh, Priya just saying the cost of living has gone up. We now have VAT. That is calculable. It has gone up. Your water bill that never attracted value-added tax is now, paying taxes on that.
Internet services as well. Just me put that in
Internet
there.
services, you're paying taxes on
Yes,
that.
yeah.
Healthcare.
Many of the things that we never paid VAT on before, you are paying VAT on it now. Which means you got a whole on-the-ground economy going on with people saying, I don't want a receipt.
Yes.
So I don't get a receipt, I don't have to pay VAT. So you pass it. So we're encouraging people to criminalize themselves and to do things that take away from their dignity just to escape not being able to live in a country that they can't afford to live in anymore. So the cost of living has risen. It's not whether we're reimagining this. Because when VAT came on electricity, people couldn't turn off their fridges and say, well, I'm not going to have a fridge anymore.
Yes.
You'd already become accustomed to a certain standard of life. You have 2 children going to school. You need to freeze your stuff and put your stuff in your fridge so you can cook it all week and you're not shopping every day. So yes, we are, if nothing else you want to argue, those bills have gone up. And they have gone up significantly by 14% for everyone.
Yeah.
So
I know while you were the former Minister of Education, you would have worked with vulnerable groups, and if you look at the track record, you've seen that you've done a lot there as well. A lot of policies or help influencing policies with vulnerable groups. And as one just mentioned, we've seen increased cases of cost of living going up, and there's also increased cases of neglect in social services.
Yes.
Could you share your views?
The president recently said, sometimes I see things posted by the Director of Public Information. I don't bother much because I really think he is semi-literate. But I feel strongly about it. I don't think he's altogether there. And it shows in the way he carries himself. More importantly, forget what I think about him. His own colleagues and peers believe he's a total misfit for that office. But that's a minion, junior officer. I don't bother too much when they post things, but I saw the president himself sit at a TV interview and said to a child interviewing him that his greatest accomplishment is, he spoke to somebody, and the somebody told him that they were not going to come to Queen's College in Georgetown, they were going to stay at Anna Regina. When the child asked him, so what do you think is your greatest accomplishment in education? He said, the fact that we've equalized education and this child is staying at Anna Regina. That is a man out to sea. First of all, you've only been there 4 years. There's very little that changes in your education cycle in 4 years, if he doesn't know. But more importantly, this is a president who does not understand what he's talking about. We had a girl in 2012 from Abrams Zoo on the Essequibo coast that topped the Caribbean at CXC. So 5 years before 2012, was 5 years before 2008, she chose not to come to Georgetown to go to school because Anna Regina had already equalized education. In 2014, I believe it was, we had a child who topped the Caribbean called Yogita Fasad with 20 grade ones. She went to Anna Regina. She had topped the country 5 years before that and topped the country at Common Entrance and GSA and stayed in Anna Regina. So that's not a president's accomplishment. That's not an APNU's accomplishment. In fact, I want him to go and speak to the teachers at Anna Regina. Go and speak to them and hear how they're struggling to keep the standards they've established there because of small things like procurement issues in their labs, because of issues like teachers not getting what they used to get before and feeling extremely despondent. So when he says things like that, that's when you realize this fella is totally out to sea. That's not your accomplishment, Mr. Granger. That is an accomplishment that has been there long before you. And to sit and boast about it is as dishonest as saying on the 8th of July that you expect the leader of the opposition to submit names to you that were on the 3 lists that he had submitted before, and then on the 4th of July saying that, and then on the 12th of July saying, we don't know why he submitted these names again, they were already rejected.
We saw the video.
So this is a person who has come to be known to us as somebody who we can't really trust his word, and that's always a dangerous thing. Your president, at least, you should be able to trust.
Yes, you actually went into my next question about the regression of the education sector.
Right.
Can you point to some specifics?
So let me say this,
in terms of the regression? Some specifics.
Right. Politically, I'd like to sit here and tell you the education sector has regressed because that suits our narrative, or that could suit our narrative, but I won't tell you that because it's not true. What happens with education is we were on a trajectory, right? We had a 5-year plan, and once that plan kept getting implemented, we'd see our schools doing better. Every single thing this government boasts about, we left them in place. So I see they had something looking like a pie chart and said they now have 300 more places in primary schools. Those were primary schools we had identified that needed to be built and had funded. They said they had more places in high schools. That's money we got from the PPP civic government, applied for, put up the proposals, did all the groundwork for, and got from the World Bank, a $10 million secondary improvement project. That's us building those schools in Parfait, Harmony, and Grove. You came in and you found that they would be unable to access money like that because they wouldn't be able to put up a project proposal. It would be Nicolette doing it, Ms. Henry, the Minister of Education. I doubt that she'd be able to function in that regard. They said they brought in universal secondary education in Region 8. That's us building Cato.
That's not true,
Cato
yes.
had some issues,
Yes,
admittedly,
we remember.
but
Yeah.
they contracted doing
Yes.
some crappy work,
Yes.
and the person who was supervising it, all off-site. They were not ministry personnel. They were people who bid and won a bid through a public procurement process, according to the laws. And so that didn't actually get commissioned, and that was an upset
Well,
for us.
under.
So all of these things were done by the PPP. So the president and the APNU have done nothing special for education. If you look at their articles that show very clearly, not local articles, international articles about how we were reducing the number of dropouts and so on. So that was only going to get better over time, which it has got.
Which is something they're boasting that they did now.
Right, so they
increase.
didn't because, and you know, the problem, and that is the problem, if you think you did so well and you think people know you did so well, so you can sit on TV and say whatever you want. People know what has been happening and what is not happening anymore. People know those internal struggles about having to buy things like chemicals for their children to use in labs to prepare their SBAs. They know that. But here, look, if you think you did so well, go to the election.
Indeed.
Name the date.
Indeed.
Name the date, let's have the election. And if people felt the impact of your beautiful service that you promised them, they'll vote you back in.
Yes, but I just want to say this. I was attending the University of Guyana when President Granger, then Mr. Granger, he had attended, and he was campaigning, of course, and he was saying all of the issues that UG had at that point. But now we see a few years later, tuition has increased 35% in some cases, making it quite difficult for persons to be able to afford the university level education. Do you have any perspective on that specifically on UG?
The whole issue is everything that they promised.
And of course, the law school that they said that they
right,
but
which
that
is
was
not
never-
going to happen.
That's-
But
Yes.
That's
But
a relief.
everything that was promised by the APNU AFC government has almost fallen through. Well, not almost. Everything, we can't find a promise they made that they kept. So they can put up ads and so on, but people feel impact. So you're talking about a 35% increase. But imagine that 35% increase for a man who has now lost his job, so he can't support his son or daughter going to UG because he got knocked off of the estate. That's a reality for 30,000 people
Yes.
who lost their jobs. And then, in addition to losing your job and having this child now at UG, you got to pay VAT on all these services. Your taxi fare has gone up, your electricity has gone up, your phone bill has gone up, internet services have gone up. That is the reality our people are living. And it's unfortunate that he's not seeing it. My Facebook page reminded me that a couple of years ago, the president said very shockingly, he wasn't president at the time, he was opposition leader, and I'm very rarely speechless, but I was actually speechless at that. He said, this is from his lips, this is not someone prompting him, that we were engaging in education apartheid, and what he had done was watch the faces of the children who were passing common entrance or doing well in his view, and said that we were engaging in education apartheid. Now, this is always a very difficult and painful topic to discuss because apartheid means one thing, that it's always only ever been used across the world to distinguish between ethnicities. And so he looked at these little children and didn't see little Guyanese children. He saw little children of a particular ethnicity. Here, 4 years later, what has changed? What has changed?
Indeed.
Nothing has changed. The issue is not that little Indian children are doing well or little red children or little yellow children. These are little Guyanese children. And we must examine what their story is to see how we can multiply that across social sector, across social class, across economic barriers, across private and public schools. That's what we have to do. I mean, I've never seen a child and define them by the way they look. This is a child, this is a Guyanese child. The issue is simply because of our numbers, as Henry Jeffrey pointed out later on in an article, based on that same education apartheid thing, that because you have more of a particular ethnicity, more will do well, but more will also do worse. In the last bracket, in the people who getting last, you'll have more of that ethnicity also. It's just a statistical, geographic, demographic kind of figure, but he was not ashamed to say it. That's what I'm saying. And I'm saying racism doesn't just stop. It doesn't just stop. That's always something for me. If you can see this in your heart, then oof, like I didn't even see that. If you're seeing this, then we're like very different people, and that does not just stop. So yeah.
Before we move into our next topic, which is very much on the minds of everyone, as the former Minister of Education, we recently had students completing NGSA. To those students, what would you like to say something to them?
Well, you know, I'm always extremely pleased. We see children who do fantastically, and it's not always the children you expect to do well. So so to all the kids who wrote NGSA, I am saying to you that we have 60-something million children across the world who never reach where you have reached, which is completion of primary school. A lot of those are girls. If you got there, you're already a winner. Now, what we have not been able to do as a country properly is to say to you that wherever you go, you can do well. The PPP Civic moved away from QC and Bishops being the best schools, and we were getting results from Brigham and Central and Anna Regina and New Amsterdam Multi, Christianburg, and those kinds of schools, like 95% pass rates. If you got those schools, you didn't get QC, you're doing fine. You'll do fine. Just put your head down and do your work. But there were lovely stories to be told, where you saw children who weren't all the high flyers all the time coming forward and really performing. So I'm saying that to the children now who are getting 80 something and early 90%, you could come and be whatever you want to be and do whatever you want to do. And so I'm very pleased that the results came out the way they did. They don't look or aren't very different from results we got in previous years. You see private schools doing better. For me, private schools host Guyanese children, so I don't care. But we should examine why. We're not teaching them different. The teachers are not from space. They're from the same Guyana Teachers Training College, Sierra Platas. The children didn't come from a particular place. They're the same children we have. So what are the things that we have to speak frankly about some of those things? We have more involved parents in the private schools, and then we also have parents who don't care. They think you drop your child off and you pay and that's enough. But parents are a little bit more involved. The discipline is better, so you can't throw children out to the public schools. But if you come late and you're refusing to come early, a private school could ask you to leave. So the discipline is a little bit better. And the teachers, if the teachers don't perform, they have to leave. There's no union protecting them. Whereas I was talking to a girl who does nails today. She was actually doing my nails, and she said, she said her daughter moved from getting second in the class to 70-something%. I said, well, didn't they call you? This is a public school. And she said, no, nobody ever called her or told her anything. I mean, that's a teacher failing. If your child is going to move from performing very well to not performing as well, in such a big gap, then you need to call and find out, see, examine, check. But I would be a teacher who is interested to see what's going on. So congrats to all those children. They've done very well.
Thank you.
All right, so moving to our other thing. I know you're a member of the PPC Manifesto Committee.
Yes.
And I have here a precursor of what the Manifesto Committee has been working on, just to share with the viewers briefly. The very first one relates directly to you, as a matter of fact. The PPP is promising the restoration of the 10,000 cash grant to school children, the reinstay of the water subsidies to pensioners, which we were speaking about earlier, reversal of VAT on essential services, including water, electricity, health care, removal of VAT on data, as one mentioned earlier, and those are just a few of the things. Now, can you give us an update as to how this is progressing and some other promises maybe directly relating to
So with the
education?
Manifesto Committee, what we had to do, these are never committees for the PPP. We could make every promise in the world. We're in opposition, whatever. But we know, and we've always known, that we are going to be the next government. And so our promises have to be real, and they have to be promises we could keep. And so we sat down and very strategically looked at what are the big issues affecting people's daily lives. How is it we can bring you back to, as a family, as a worker, as a mother, as a teacher, as a public servant, as a family unit, as a community, as a country? How could we take our people back to a place where they're living, they feel confident about being able to invest, being able to plan, some predictability as to what will come and what won't come in successive budgets and so on. That's what we looked at. We have decided very firmly that the issues that are causing hardship now, for example, the VAT on all the utility services, that's going to be removed. Restoration of the $10,000 cash grant, because we know how helpful that was to parents. That will go over time up to $50,000 a child, so it doesn't end at 10. That was the initial plan anyway. All those things like the VAT on, removing VAT on exports and the tires that are extremely costly and the vehicle years, the age limits and so on. All of that will be reversed, because that will bring us back to a place where we're not engaging in only rich people or only a certain set of people could live a good life in Ghana. What we want is for people to live, for our middle class, all our families, the majority of our families, to be able to live a life that allows them dignity and to feel like they're a part of Guyana. So it's divided into economic services. What are we going to do for the economy? What are we going to do for the social services? How are we going to make sure rights are protected? Rights of minorities, Amerindians, people from the women, children, people from the LGBTQ community, making sure that rights are and enjoy a high place on our agenda. Those are some of the segments we're looking at. This infrastructure. How are we going to make sure that people who have now gone into the housing developments can travel to work and so on quickly, efficiently, safely? How are we going to make sure more families, because we gave about 110,000 families their own house lot, which didn't only provide a home for them. I mean, it sounds like a small thing. It gave them capital. They could go to the bank now and mortgage that and get some money, buy a car, keep improving their lives. They could will it to their children. Long ago, only rich people live a will, because nobody else ain't got to leave in a will. Now, more of our families can. I don't think this government has given out 3,000 house lots in all the time they're there.
Or
300 even.
One of the promise of the BP is over the first 5-year period is to increase it to 50,000 house lots.
Right, and
50,000 jobs.
Right, and it's because it's how it will be spread out. So it's not wild promises, because we are very aware that the last thing I would want to do is be like this government. You stand up on a podium and you make a promise and you're unable to keep it when you get into office. So you won't see wild promises coming from the PPP. You're not going to see that the moment the first barrel of oil comes up, each person is going to have $2 million in their bank account and so, because those are not promises we can keep, especially given the fact that this government has already spent about the first 3 years of our oil money by putting themselves and the country in debt.
Yes. I would just like to say though, and this is going back to the whole consultative process that the PPP is always engaging in, which I must say is something that I really admired, because when the opposition leader had to present his list, he held consultative meetings with the White Section Society in Guyana. So the manifesto committee, you guys, I know you've met with a few groups, religious groups, social groups.
It's not a few groups. We had a huge meeting. First of all, as we go out, we come back in. And it's not a quiet committee. So let me just say that. It's a committee that has robust debate with people saying, let's do this. Or one member saying, I'd like to see this happen. I'm going to say, well, you can't do it now. So let's be careful about how we promise that. But outside of just the committee members, we met with a wide stakeholder at different forums, wide stakeholder forum where we had business people, housewives, teachers, people from the religious groups, women, Amerindian leaders, as well as members of the population, just farmers, just about everybody, hearing from them, what are your problems, what do you like to see us do? And that helps us to craft what we will put forward. We're not making policy for us. We're making policy for the people of Guyana who are looking to us for good leadership. And that's how we've always done it. Even going out now to bottom house meetings, and you know, this government has fired sugar workers, but I don't believe they ever once stopped, went to a sugar workers home and said, how are you managing? How are you coping? All right, we have said we're giving you back your job. So all these sugar workers are going to be re-employed at these reopened estates. But they have not once gone to say, how are you coping? If I were Minister of Education and my government had been heartless enough to shut down 3 estates and put 7,000 people out of office, you know what I would have done? I would have gone into those areas specifically and said, we're going to give lunch to each of these children. All the children of these that are coming out of these homes, you're going to get lunch, and I want to make sure you don't have to buy a single thing for your book bag. Not a textbook, not an exercise book, because although the ministry gives, sometimes you have to supplement. So that's how you'd have made sure that at least the children are fine, right? The government could have said, these communities don't pay your light bill for a little bit till we figure out what's happening to you. They never went and asked. We have engaged all these people. We've never ducked, even when we were in government, ducked and run and hide from any difficult issue. It was always with the people that we crafted these policies. So, you know, it's a little known fact. I could tell you, for me, I mean, I didn't spend a full term at education because we were ousted because of the same no confidence, the utilization of the article in the Constitution for no confidence. We didn't fall by way of a no confidence. The president at the time, President Ramtar, had prorogued Parliament to give the parties a time to talk, and then that didn't work, and he called the elections. But at Human Services, every single promise that we made in the manifesto, every single one, without exception, we fulfilled. We fulfilled. And that means, you know, that sounds, oh, we fulfilled the promise. What does it mean when we put a family court up? And families who find themselves in conflict, which is not something we want. But if you're going to break up, then let's do this in a civil way so the children come out of this whole and healthy as far as we can make that happen. What does it mean when we say to our victims of rape, here are some new laws that will make sure the perpetrators get punished. Not only that you will be better, but that they're not on the road harming other people, that a message is being sent to society that the country is not going to accept this. When we say we're going to do an economic program for single-parent women, we did the Women of Worth program. Yes. What does that mean is that people who had no house to go and mortgage at a bank could come and have a collateral-free, very low interest loan where they could start businesses or expand their businesses. So it's fulfilling these promises is not just so that we could check a box, it's so that we could impact lives positively, so that this whole country could come up. And you saw it. You saw the effect of that. In 1991, the World Bank, this is not Guyana, the World Bank, an international financial institution, did a study on us. And they said then that 60-something%, I think it was 63% of our people were living in poverty. That's the World Bank. 63% of Guyanese. That means out of every 100 Guyanese, 63 were poor. Yes. In 1998, in 2008, they did the same sort of study on us, and they said that we had reduced our poverty by half. The people who were living in poverty were reduced by half. So we had a 30-something%, and by the time we left office in 2015, it would have gone down significantly. Excellent. The point I'm making is that these policies, when we fulfill promises, they go towards improving people's lives. They come out of poverty. Their children do better. Their health care standard is better. Their lifestyle, we improve the life expectancy. We moved it from 60-something years old to 71 years old. So people were doing better, and it showed in all these statistical studies.
I'm sure our viewers are recalling a lot of what you're saying, Ms. Manichin.
Right. And we made mistakes. People make mistakes, and we didn't go as fast as we wanted to go sometimes, because you have all kinds of things happening. But I could say for sure that we went far faster in any given year than this government has done in all 4 combined.
Well said. Well
thank
said.
you so much
yes,
for...
Yes,
we've unfortunately run out of time. The operators frantically waving.
Yes. So tonight we covered the continued missteps of the coalition government, and just to wrap up my point, I want to encourage our viewers and those that will see this video to continue to express your political views, continue to express your social views. and not be deterred or discouraged by anyone who would want to attack you or label you according to how they feel. I know that we are coming up to election season, and I've seen a lot of this being done, but I just want to encourage our viewers to continue to let your voice be heard and not allow anyone to defer you.
Well, thank you again for being on the show. Hope you don't be a stranger.
No, thanks for having me. I'd love to come back.
And great. So thank you everyone for being with us for the last hour. Have a good week and hope to see you guys next week.
See you. Bye.
Support Donald Trump, given some of his racially inflammatory rhetoric.
The producer came to my office and he said, listen, I want you to look at this first.